that serves Douglas, Sarpy, and Washington counties. And so our mission is really to promote economic prosperity and really build and bridge the gap between employers and career seekers. So you can find more helpful information on our website, which you can see the URL link on the screen.
Yeah, so we've got tons of great resources on our website. It really is a one-stop connection for businesses and job seekers as well as community partners. So as Jasmine mentioned, I mean, we serve a number of different folks walking through our doors on a daily basis, and so that includes both businesses and job seekers. So we create content like today's presentation for on the business side of things. We do lots of other fun stuff too that we'll talk a little bit about here on some of these upcoming slides.
And if you're interested in getting a little more involved, feel free to scan the QR code or go on our website under the Employers tab and fill out the Business Services Registration form. That'll just give us a little better idea of what your needs are, and then we'll get connected and then go from there.
Also, we have a pretty fabulous newsletter that comes out monthly that highlights all of the upcoming events. So that can include job fairs, it can include employer spotlights, lots of different opportunities for businesses to participate with us with the workforce system. You can find out about all of those through this newsletter that will hit your inbox at the start of every month. You just need to sign up on our website or through this QR code. On the website, you can find it under the Employers tab. That employer's menu item, and just right there at the top of that page is something that says sign up for our newsletter.
And another way to stay connected is to follow us on social media. And so you can find those links on our website as well as scanning the QR codes. We try and keep everyone updated through our platforms. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and newly TikTok, still working through some things there, but there are some posts available now if you're curious to see what we did.
And then we also offer a chance for you to jump in and really find out more about all of the services that we offer at HWS. And you know, this short little 5-minute intro here only hits on a few of the things that we offer, but we do an hour-long orientation for businesses as well as community partners that might be interested in working with us. And because we are you know, federally funded, locally funded, state funded, our programs are all available for free, which is really cool. So join us the second Wednesday of each month between 12 and 1 p.m. You can sign up for that through the QR code. Also on our homepage, you can find the link to sign up there as well.
And we are located on 57th and Ames. You might recognize the Planet Fitness that's right on the corner. And so we're located right next to them. As you can see, we have a lot of space available to the community, which is free of charge. And so if you're interested in booking some space or some rooms, there is a tab under the Partners tab on our website. And so you're able to book a room whenever you feel is necessary.
So pretty cool combo. You can go to Planet Fitness, you can pump that iron, get ripped, and then come over and see us at HWS and yeah, find some good job candidates. Also really cool, this is coming up soon this fall. We are going to be opening up a new location in addition to our current location. So this will be on South 24th Street, about a block north of South High School. It's our new South Omaha affiliate site. You can see the contact information for Jennifer Rodriguez. She's a new team member of ours that is helping to coordinate all of those activities at that center. And so super excited about that. That's coming very, very soon.
And with that, you'll have the opportunity to learn a little more, see how you can be involved. Next month, we will be having Jennifer speak on updates and seeing different possibilities of partnerships there. And so maybe get some pictures of renderings and kind of get the inside scoop on the newest updates for South Omaha.
And then that would be the end of our regular slideshow. So today, as we mentioned, we've got Vanessa Martinez-Hernandez from Mutual of Omaha, formerly of Heartland Workforce Solutions a couple of years ago. So former colleague of mine, and appreciate her being here. But before we get started, before we hand off some of the conversation to her, we want to do a couple of things. One of them is launch a couple poll questions just to kind of get a feel for the audience that's involved here. And as we do that, want to make sure that everybody knows how you can ask questions as we go along in this presentation. So there's a few different ways. There's the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to type in any questions in the chat feature. There's also a Q&A feature as well on that menu if you want to ask questions that way, or if you just want to unmute yourself, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask a question if you got a super long one that way. So first question is going to be, does your company have employee resource groups, ERGs? Yes, no question. Just take a second and answer that. All right. So we got a little bit of a mix there. And then the size of your organization as well, if you wouldn't mind just answering, because sometimes ERGs are a little bit different depending on the size of the organization, smaller organizations versus bigger organizations. So wherever your company might fit on the scale of 1 to 5 people, 6 to 20, 21 to 100, 101 to 500, or more than 500. And it looks like we've got, again, a mix of folks from the small end as well as the big end of things. So appreciate that feedback. So as we jump into this conversation today with Vanessa, what we're going to do is kind of do some questions that Jasmine and I have come up with and kind of have more of a conversation with Vanessa about this. But before we jump into those questions, just initially, Vanessa, is there anything that you'd love to start with, kick things off and just say
just to say hi, everyone. In my current role, all of the things that I do are surrounded by employee resource groups. So it's a pretty unique position and a really cool opportunity and fun opportunity for me to learn from all of the different groups that we get to work with internally at Mutual of Omaha. This should be very conversational. So if you have a question, use one of the methods to ask the question, happy to answer and give sort of my experience and viewpoint. Good to know who's sort of in the room. I think ERGs can look a little bit different depending on the size of the organization and the amount of resources that you're able to dedicate to employee resource groups. And yeah, that's really all I have.
All right. So I guess to kick things off, asking the first question, we've said employee resource group, that's ERG, that's what it stands for. What's kind of the meaning behind them? Why do we have ERGs?
Yeah, I think for Mutual of Omaha specifically, we have a few different focuses that employee resource groups contribute. And sometimes they have different names. Sometimes they're business affinity groups or just affinity groups at other organizations. And for us, ERGs are really a place for individuals to come together, either because they are in a specific demographic or they're interested and want to understand more and become an ally or serve in their allyship. And also it helps folks from different viewpoints and different experiences bring forward ideas that can help better serve the customer that maybe we haven't thought about, which has been cool to see how that sort of plays out in the different groups. I think all of them have their own specific interests that they serve, which brings that unique lens forward from other folks who maybe don't understand or don't have that same lived experience. It's been cool to see. So those are sort of the purpose to really create that sense of belonging for folks, because we know that when folks feel good at work, they tend to stay longer, which helps everyone in the long run.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to a question. I know Mutual of Omaha is known for your ERGs, and so I'd like to know how many and like what ERGs you guys have.
Yeah. So we have quite a few in comparison to some of the other local companies, is what I've discovered. So we have 9 total employee resource groups. And I think there's a little bit of back and forth on this. But I think the first one was established in 2010. So there were 2 who started up very closely, who are very competitive about their start date. But we have all kinds of different employee resource groups. So I'll just go through the names and hopefully give a good overview. So our first employee resource group is called Advocates for All Abilities, or A3 for short, because we love acronyms, right? And that's really focused on advocating for folks with all levels of abilities. So they work really super close with our HR and talent acquisition people to help them sort of think about how do we retain and recruit talent of different levels of ability, and make sure that we're providing an environment where they are able to be as successful as possible. Our second employee resource group is our Black employee resource group, or BERG, and they are super focused on bringing educational content to folks throughout the enterprise, and they do a whole bunch of different stuff throughout the year. And they are continually growing in the volunteer space in the community, which is nice to see. Our next group is Emerging Leaders Network, which is essentially like our young professionals, except we don't put an age limit because we think you can be a leader at any age. It doesn't matter. And maybe you are branching out into a new sort of skill, or you want to learn a new skill, or step into a different sort of career path. Those folks are really crucial in that sort of space there. And they are our second largest ERG, and are actually the first ERG that was established here at Mutual of Omaha. Our next ERG is Global, and this is a mouthful, so it's I don't want to butcher the name, but basically it's our LGBTQ friendly organization, ERG here at the organization. And they also do a lot of educational activities and events for associates here. We're also working on creating some spaces for folks that would provide a sense of community and support with all of the different things happening in the LGBTQ community, just to make sure that folks, when they're coming to work, feel supported and safe. And our next ERG is Latino Employee Connections, and they are the second ERG that was established here at Mutual of Omaha. And so they have been around for a very long time and have done a lot of programming around cultural aspects and engaging the folks in that way. We just had a food truck rally for Cinco de Mayo, which was really nice. Most of the folks who are working at Mutual of Omaha are still remote, so it's really nice to get to come in person and meet people like in real life. So that was fun. And our next employee resource group is Mutual's Asian and Pacific Associates, or MAPA. And they are one of the younger ERGs. So they were established in 2016, which seems like a long time, but they are still one of the younger ERGs here at Mutual of Omaha. Our next ERG is VERB, or the Veterans Employee Resource Board. And through that, they do a lot of service in the community and really encourage folks who may not necessarily have served, but maybe you're a parent, a sibling, a spouse, to join and support that sort of ERG here internally. We're getting close to the end. Our next ERG is Women in Leadership, and they are our largest ERG with just over 960 members, which is very big. And so they are really great at doing networking opportunities and bringing in guest speakers to tell their story. So they're very big on storytelling, which is really cool to see. And they also host a lot of informal mentorship. here at the organization. And our last ERG, which is sort of in transition at this point, is called Wealth of Wisdom, or WOW. And those folks have helped a lot with internal mentoring and have done a lot of matching for folks who are onboarding and coming in new to Mutual of Omaha. But we are looking at getting a system that will streamline all of the mentoring programs within Mutual of Omaha so that we can better gauge sort of the outcomes from mentoring throughout our organization. So those are the 9 ERGs that we have here at Mutual.
And you mentioned at the start that, like, you know, some of them have been around since around 2010 or so. What are, of those 9, what are the more recently developed ones?
Yeah, so our most recent one, I should have mentioned that, is A3. So they were established in 2018. And so with the pandemic, it was really interesting for a newer ERG to figure out how to engage folks. So that's our newest ERG. We've had some inquiries about creating more ERGs, but it's actually a lot of work to get an ERG started. And we want to make sure that we have buy-in from our executive leadership team as well, so that they can help the folks who are volunteering in those positions to help navigate some of the challenges that might come up along the way. So we may see some additional ERGs come up within the next few years, but as of right now, I think we're standing firm at the 9.
Sweet. No, that's awesome. I think it kind of sets the tone a little bit and kind of gives a good example of what ERGs could be made and what people can get involved with. So that's cool.
Yeah.
How often does each ERG meet? Is it like a monthly thing or every other month?
Yeah, so we have sort of a semi-formalized structure for our ERGs. So each of the ERGs has their own board that oversees the activities and does all the planning and execution of things. And so they are required to meet once a month as a board. And then each of those also have an executive committee. And then the executive committee, depending on what it is that they're working on, has the ability to determine if they need to meet more often to connect with each other. But we really leave that up to their discretion. So we don't tell them like what day of the month. We just want them to make sure that they're checking in monthly. And then aside from that, the ERG presidents and vice presidents come together once a month to have a meeting, and we go over some high level things. That's a meeting that I help coordinate and sort of share out things that are upcoming, maybe give them some insight and opportunity to other unique leadership opportunities that they're able to engage in as ERG leaders, which we are super thankful for, because all of the associates who are in those ERG board positions also are in charge of another role aside from just being part of ERG. So we really appreciate them volunteering their time to help navigate what that looks like, and for being able to go above and beyond to help create that sense of belonging through the ERG work at Mutual.
Could you talk a little bit more? I mean, I'm sure that like each of the meetings is maybe significantly different one from another, but there's probably a lot of similarities too. And so just kind of talk about like the structure of the meetings, as well as like if each of the ERGs has like an official like chairperson or, you know, secretary type person taking notes, or if like, and then like even like with the leadership roles within those ERGs, like how long is that person in place with the leadership role, and does that change over pretty frequently?
Yeah. So each of our ERG board members agrees to come on for a 2-year term. So that's sort of the expectation, is that folks will come on for 2 years and serve in the capacity to which they applied for and are selected for. And so it's a pretty formal, so if you think of like a nonprofit board, it's a pretty similar structure for ERG board. So we have presidents, vice presidents, a secretary and treasurer, we have a communications chair, a member engagement chair, and then we have several like program and engagement chairs, or who are the folks who really focus on events and getting those executed and put together. And then we have space for members at large on each of the ERG boards. So those are the main positions that get filled. And with that, if folks are really enjoying the time and serving, they can serve up to 2 terms without reapplying. So essentially they could serve 4 years on the same ERG board in 2 different capacities, depending on how that goes for them. And so we have staggered terms. So we have some folks who have started, like, start every other year. And so there's always new folks coming on every year, which I think makes it easier to help the new folks learn from the folks who have been on and serving in the ERG boards, so that it's not as scary or as difficult for them to come on. It's not everybody's new to this thing at once. So that's been helpful. And we do an annual call for leadership is what we call it. And that's sort of our recruitment period for folks across the enterprise to encourage them to be part of ERG board service and leadership. They all obviously have been members at some point, but there's really no responsibility for just to be part of an ERG membership. There's no accountability. You can sign up at any time and be a part of as many ERGs as you want to. There's no limit or expectation. So when folks are getting on the ERG boards and serving in those roles and capacities, it really is a step up and a commitment. We do advise that it takes about 4 to 6 hours a month to serve in an ERG capacity for folks. And we want to make sure that those folks applying have support from their leadership, because we know that it's going to take them away from their regular duties. And we just want to make sure that we're not sort of throwing a curveball at anybody, like you signed up to do this thing, you had no idea what it was, and now you're here and it's more work than you thought it was. So we try to be really transparent with folks about that time commitment. And I think depending on what each ERG is focused on throughout the year, sort of determines that. So it might only be the 2 hours that they meet a month, but it also might be 8 hours that they need to meet in 1 month. So it's sort of flexes, but we advise that 4 to 6 hours a month is what you're going to dedicate in serving in the ERG board capacity. I hope I answered all the questions that you asked.
I think so. I mean, have most of these meetings gone to like virtual meetings, I would assume, because you're spread out everywhere? Are there ever like any in-person meetings? Does that happen sometimes?
Yeah. So sorry, I missed the ball on answering the meeting question. Yeah, so most of the meetings I would say are virtual. We're starting to get into this hybrid sort of situation because we have space available at the office in the capacity now to do the hybrid meetings. So we are doing more of that. But we also have to be mindful that now for Mutual of Omaha, most of the associates we're hiring are outside of the Omaha area. So our remote base of workers is growing. And so just being mindful of the opportunity to engage folks no matter where they are is super important. I think it's a fine line and a balance between the two. But I do think that more folks are starting to get into the hybrid mode. And I think we're getting better with engaging how that works, right? So it's a similar experience for those in person and those online. So trying to make sure that nobody feels left out, no matter how they're participating. But for the most part, like the monthly board meetings for the ERGs, those are all virtual. None of those are in person at this time. And then our monthly ERG leadership meetings with the presidents and vice presidents, those are all virtual too.
And so with kind of outside of those ERG meetings, whenever they do occur, how does everyone communicate? And like, for example, I'm sure you're planning things, and so there's like notes and secretary notes and all that stuff. Where do you guys store all of that?
Yeah, so Mutual of Omaha is a Teams organization, and Teams houses all of the information. So that's usually where most folks communicate and store the information so that everybody can access it at any time. So meeting notes for board meetings is stored in the Teams channel. So each of the ERGs has their own like specific board channel that they work on. And then we have a shared one where I can communicate with all of the ERG board members, because it's over 120 associates. So it's easy for us to send messaging out there. And in Teams, you can also create spaces where there's like files, so that if somebody needs to access something, that sort of lives out there too. And then I would say like the good old email also works. So we do a lot of email communication, because we know that we're working on a lot of different things all at once. So just trying to keep everybody in the loop and up to date. I would say those are our top two. So utilizing the Teams channel to communicate, messaging and share out like documentation and that sort of stuff, and then just email.
Nice.
Awesome.
I'm guessing you probably are looking at how other businesses are operating their ERGs as well. Have you learned anything from other businesses, or do you ever collaborate with any other organizations with your ERGs?
Yeah, so we get a lot of outreach from some of the organizations in Omaha who also have ERG. So we partnered with Union Pacific on some ERG focused events. We've also partnered with the Lindsay Corporation and are looking to host like a young professional ERG sort of networking event in the future. And I think we're totally open to doing that. I think sometimes there's some privacy things that might get in the way, but we can figure that sort of thing out. And yeah, it's also good for us to resource share, right? We appreciate all that ERGs do, but we do have like a set limit of the budget that we're able to allot to the things that they want to do. And so if we can cost share that with other organizations and their ERGs who are wanting to do something similar to engage folks, we appreciate that.
Awesome. So along with like the budgets side, so there's a budget set for each ERG, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's how we're set up. I know some
Okay.
other organizations are set up maybe a little bit differently, and they just come with a request. But we set aside a specific amount for each of our ERGs. So all 9 of our ERGs get the same amount of money each year. And then we really give them the creativity and oversight to say, okay, here's the funds that you have. You do whatever it is that you think is most useful with these funds. And then there's occasional things where Mutual of Omaha sponsors a lot of things in the community. So if an ERG wants to engage, for instance, coming up are like the Juneteenth Omaha Freedom Festival and the Omaha Pride Parade. And so those are company sponsored events that will also take on most of the cost if the ERG wants to participate, because those can get really expensive really quick. And we want to make sure that we're helping support things that they want to do, and they don't have to worry about like, well, how are we going to pay for our participation, or, you know, things like that. So we take on some of the cost when it comes to things like that, when our ERGs want to engage.
And you mentioned with that, like each of the ERGs get the same amount of money, not a formal request type of thing, but is there any sort of requirement that the ERGs have to complete annually or something that contributes to maybe like an organizational strategic plan or something of that nature? Is there some sort of stuff
Yeah.
that's required? I don't know.
Yeah. So each of the ERGs is required to track how they're spending their money. And then we have an annual report that we sort of monitor and look at, like, here's what was being spent over the year. And then when ERGs are planning events, we also have like a form that they send over to our team just to make sure that everything looks okay. We have a non-solicitation policy here, which is always fun to navigate. So basically, we want to make sure that if our ERGs are working with community organizations or speakers from the community, that we have either a contract in place of what that expectation is or it looks like, or that we have an established philanthropic relationship with the organization. We have a non-discrimination policy that we abide by. So not all organizations in the community fall into that category. So we just want to make sure that when ERGs are wanting to engage, with organizations outside of Mutual of Omaha, that they're coming to us and working with our team to make sure that that organization aligns with our sort of agreements.
Yeah. And so along with that, I mean, I kind of think about policies. So are there policies put in place for ERGs? And then kind of how does that work for like employee time limitations, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So it used to be that Mutual Omaha had a cap of 8 hours of volunteer time a month, and that could look like ERG activity involvement or volunteering outside of Mutual of Omaha. But we have since, like in the last, I want to say like 8 years, removed that requirement. And so what folks have to do now is just really work with their leader and their supervisor to get time approved. And that looks a little bit different for depending on what area you work in. So we know that some of our frontline associates who are on the phone have a little bit more difficulty getting away from the phone just because of the influx and the volume, right? We need people there to answer and serve the customers on the phone. And so just being delicate, but they have a system where they can go in and request those times off, and then the supervisor has the ability based on the numbers and the volume to approve that. And then in some areas, it really is just going to your supervisor directly and saying, hey, this organization or this ERG is having this event, can I go? And it's pretty simple and informal in that way. So it looks a little different depending on what role you're serving in at Mutual, but we encourage folks to be involved and get engaged for personal and professional development opportunities, whatever that looks like to them. What was that second part of the question you asked me?
No, I think you answered it with the employee time limitations and all of that. So thank you for that.
What about like when an ERG is starting to lose momentum? And I mean, do they ever get phased out? Does that ever happen?
So I don't think we've experienced that necessarily. I did mention that our WOW ERG is sort of like in a re-phase or like reinvention period, because we're going to be shifting mentoring to like an enterprise-wide sort of system, whereas they were really crucial in helping get that set up. So we are looking at sort of an intergenerational ERG as their next purpose, and making sure that there's an ability for knowledge transfer and sort of a reverse mentoring model, if you will. So not always the more experienced folks mentoring the newer folks, but maybe it's the newer folks going to the experienced folks with ideas and hopefully creating more opportunities for innovation throughout the area. That's still new. We're still in a discovery period on that. But most of our ERGs are pretty successful in engagement and continue just to grow year over year. So I think we've been really fortunate with that.
Awesome. And so with your role, do you get to be part of each of these ERGs, or how do you make sure that things are going well and kind of assessing each ERG?
Yeah, so I have the fun job. Yeah, I do get to engage in all of the stuff that the ERGs host. And I'm also here as a resource. So if they need like, we have internal signups, if they need those created, working with our communications team to send out messaging about events that are upcoming, making sure that that's done. We also have an internal newsletter, so making sure that the ERG activities and information is updated and shared that way so folks are able to engage. And also here to collect some numbers. I know probably not the favorite part of the ERG leaders, but yes, trying to capture those sort of metrics throughout the year. So ERG growth, ERG engagement, and like what's the sustainability of some of the practices that they're doing. So like what events are going well, what events have been well attended, how do we continue to build on those sort of things, or if there's opportunity for the business for them to give feedback. We recently established a full cadence for each of our ERGs to meet with our executive team and sort of have like a touch base, if you will. We call them listening sessions. And so I think that's been a really impactful opportunity for our ERG leaders to speak on behalf of their ERGs specifically. And there have been a lot of opportunities shared for us to do better as a business. We know that we do great things, but we also know that we still have work to do, right? We're not perfect. And so hearing different perspectives from folks across the enterprise in different roles, so whether they're frontline associates or they're in a leadership role, hearing like their different viewpoints and experiences of serving customers and people has been helpful to know what are some of our blind spots and how do we get better and work towards fixing some of those.
Awesome. Just a reminder to everybody, keep submitting those questions. We'll take them and feed them to Vanessa as we go. So just looking at this as well, like maybe this is kind of a two-part question. So first off, like what advice would you give businesses that are looking to get ERGs up and going? And then second, like knowing like at HWS, Heartland Workforce Solutions, and how small we are as an organization, is that advice kind of the same for smaller organizations, or would you give different advice for, you know, a small nonprofit that may only have like, you know, 5 to 10 people? Is that advice the same or different? And what is that advice?
Yeah, I would say for smaller organizations, I think it has to be sort of like a grassroots effort. So I think the team of folks has to be invested in what it is that they're working towards. And I think that second part to that is like, what's your purpose? What's your goal? Like, what is it that you want to achieve? And I think for smaller groups, that might be implementing like a cultural awareness calendar. That might be your first step, is to like marking down things that are important, things that you want to highlight. And then the next step might be, how are we sort of incorporating that into our company culture or on our social media channels? Like, what are we doing to sort of uplift some of those cultural awareness dates? I know it's a large lift for smaller organizations. And I would say like once we get past like maybe 50 people-ish, then as long as it's grassroots and you have people out of that 50 who want to take charge, who are ready to like have actionable items and move forward on those, like that's pretty helpful. I know that starting an ERG is a lot of work, so you really have to have buy-in from your leadership. I think they have to see the value and the purpose and sort of support those. So making sure your leadership has buy-in. I think establishing what it is that you want to achieve, like what's your purpose, what are your outcomes that you want to see. And I think also building upon that, like revisiting regularly. Have we like a check-in? How have we established, or what have we done to move things forward? And then revisioning. So that might be like you get one thing done. And so like, what's our next objective? What are we working towards next? That's my advice.
Great advice. So that kind of leads me to my next question. I know you kind of talked about your role a little bit. Are there any additional responsibilities that, you know, are part of your role? And, you know, how long has your role been around? Like, has it been around up for a while, or when was it started? And then kind of how do you measure success in this role?
Yeah. All great questions. So our team is newer. And I want to say over the last 5 years, it's grown from 2 people to 9 people, which is a pretty good growth. And so they didn't always have a specific person dedicated to support ERGs. So I would say like that's probably 3-ish years old. And we understand that not all organizations can dedicate one person to supporting ERGs, but in this role, because they have me dedicated specifically to ERGs, I was able to come in and sort of take a look at the bylaws that were established for our ERGs and the operational protocols, and sort of rewrite and make sure that those still made sense and didn't make it like more difficult for the ERGs to do things. I've also been able to create different communication tools for folks, whether that's like spreadsheets so that everybody has line of sight to what's happening and what's going on, or just resources and reminders of like, here's what your ERG job description is. Like, if you forgot what your duties are, here's what it looks like. And maybe here are some tools that make it easier for you to do your job. And if there's a tool that you need created, letting me know, and like having that open line of communication so that I can do that and make sure that it's easier for them to do things. And measuring success, I think we base that off a lot of different things. And so some of that looks like awareness for folks, and engagement. And we also pay attention to the numbers. So our ERG, are they experiencing growth? Like, what does that look like? So we measure that as a tool, and also trying to partner with our talent acquisition HR people, to make sure that when folks are coming on board, they understand the different opportunities to engage, not just in ERGs, but other things that we have throughout the enterprise. And I would say we're still newer in capturing some of the data and information. So I think that will continue to evolve over the next year. So we're currently working on an ERG scorecard. So I would say in the next 12 months, we'll have some more information on what that looks like.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, and please, everybody, keep submitting your questions through the Q&A. So another thing that popped in my mind too is you're talking about that, it seems like you have a lot of really good resources internally with Mutual of Omaha that are now embedded, and you talked about the growth of those support positions for the ERGs. So for an organization that doesn't have that established yet, what is out there in the community, whether it's like a local organization, regional, national, that can help support the work that you're doing with ERGs? Is there stuff out there that they can tap into to kind of get some resources about how to run meetings or how to organize things or anything of that nature?
You know, I think I've been pretty fortunate in that we have been engaging ERGs for a long time, and even without the support of like a specific role to help ERGs, they've had a pretty good cadence. I don't know if there's any other resources. One thing that has been helpful is just reaching out to other people or other organizations with ERGs to learn and understand, okay, like, how does it work where you're at? What do you all do? And I think everyone's a little bit different. I think we've formalized our processes a little more than some people, and some people are even more formal than we are. I would say some of the larger organizations are even more formalized in the processes that they have, but not necessarily like any resources specifically that I could share.
And yeah, maybe they're just not out there yet, but I'm sure they will be. So that kind of leads me to the next question that I had. You've seen a little bit of the evolution there at Mutual of Omaha and the growth of those things. What are you predicting for the future of ERGs? Like, 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, where's all of this headed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would see additional ERGs come as the years move forward. I would also predict that we might see some larger, like, formal structures in place to engage more folks in those opportunities and sort of share in the duties, and not have it fall on one person or make it seem like it falls on just a few people, and sort of the delegation and the work that it takes. I also see more growth of the engagement that we have with our remote associates. So we're already seeing that number continue to grow. And I would say with the number of folks we're hiring outside of Omaha, that will just continue to grow. So being mindful of the engagement that we do virtually, and not like we're like in this weird after COVID sort of situation. But I would say that for us and our work environment, continually like engaging virtually is something that's here to stay. It's not going to be phased out or go away.
But I would imagine you're going to have some pretty awesome new meeting space for your ERGs at the new skyscraper, right? How about
Um, yeah, I would say, I know it feels like such a long time, but I'm sure it's going to come fast. But yeah, 2026 is our projected date of completion for the new building downtown. We've seen some cool renderings, and I know that they put a lot of work and intention into what the new building model is going to be. They went to some larger cities and sort of took ideas from those structures. And I think it will entice people to want to come into the office and engage. I don't know if I'm supposed to share this, but I'm going to share a little tidbit. They're planning to have like a lot of co-working space on the outside where the windows are, and then like the executive leadership offices are actually going to be in the core. And so to encourage people to like work cross-functionally, engage more, you're going to get the pretty views for being in those co-working space versus the just like singular office space in the middle. So that, I don't know if I was supposed to share that, but it's going to be pretty cool. And I think it will also it will just be a totally different vibe, right? If you've been into the office, it's a typical office now. There's a lot of cubes, there's a lot of desks, there's a lot of office space. There are pockets now since COVID where they've sort of redone and sort of tested, if you will, like different models, like putting in comfortable seating and open work areas, and that sort of situation. And that's honestly where I go to work. I never go to a desk specifically. I always am in those co-working spaces. So we'll see what happens.
That's really exciting. I know, like you said, 2026, but it's gonna be here before we know it. We're already mid 2023 already. So so I'm all out of questions, but I wanted to see if there are any common questions that you get, or that you often get, that we may have forgotten to ask.
Yeah, I would say one of the questions that I get a lot is like, how often are your ERGs like doing events? Like, what's their metric of success? And I would say for us, we have very ambitious ERGs, which we're super grateful for. They're like go-getters. They want to do stuff all the time. But we sort of advise that they should be working on one quality event per quarter. So keeping in mind that we have 9 different ERGs. So let me do some math really quick. So if we had 9, that's over 36 events each year. If they just did 1 per quarter, if each of the ERGs just did 1 per quarter, some of them do more than 1 per quarter. So we know that we have very active ERGs, and I don't think that there's pressure to do something like every month, but really just being mindful of how like the quality over quantity is what I'm trying to say. So being mindful of how are we asking folks to use their time? Like, is there opportunity for collaboration with other ERGs or other groups, whether that's internally at Mutual or externally with other partners at different organizations? And also knowing that if we're asking people to do 10 activities a month, what's the reality that they're going to be engaging in all 10 of those, right? Because we only all have so much time and we have work to do. And so finding that balance, I think is key. And I think when ERGs are just starting, their purpose and sort of like their strategic goals and plan for that first year is going to be crucial in getting them set up. So even if they don't host anything in their first year of sort of getting started, knowing and working on those goals and getting those established, like job roles, duties, assignments, and those sort of things are really important.
Yeah, so we'll appreciate that answer. That was really helpful. And so wanted to give one last chance to anybody out there that wanted to ask any additional questions. We'll give it a couple seconds here if you want to put that either in the chat or the Q&A as we wrap up. But yeah, so many cool things. I've learned a lot today. This has been really helpful.
Good. And if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out if you're working on ERGs or sort of incorporation of like DEI in general. Happy to answer questions after.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I'm not seeing anything else come through right now, so we'll just wrap this up. And first off, say thank you to Vanessa for your expertise in answering the thousands of questions that Jasmine and I had for you. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Also, definitely looking forward to next month's presentation, which is going to focus on that South Omaha location. And so good opportunities for industry engagement at that location as well. We're trying to make it a hub for both healthcare and construction. And so if you just are interested in connecting that way, or just want to find out about a cool new job center that's opening up in Omaha, join us next month. And so anything else that you'd like to add, Jasmine or Vanessa?
No,
Yeah, thank you for your time, Vanessa. I know it was super helpful for us to answering all of those questions, and I'm sure everyone listening in also had a lot of good takeaways. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both.
All right, thanks. Good seeing you.
All right,
Yep,
see
have
ya.
a good day.